Hello, my name is Liam Huggins, and I'm here for POS361, U.S. Foreign Policy, and I'm debating the topic on whether the United States should have or should not have withdrawn militarily from Afghanistan. I'm picking the side should have withdrawn. Now, before going into my defense of the withdrawal of troops within Afghanistan, I would first like to preface some issues regarding the withdrawal of troops by the Biden administration. Now, I think it's clear to many of the people who are taking this class who are going to be listening to this that the Biden administration committed some pretty clear failures leading up to the troop withdrawal and proceeding right afterwards. First, I'd say the United States just did not prepare long enough for proper evacuation of not just all relevant U.S. troops and citizens, but additionally all Afghani citizens seeking refuge from what would be the inevitable Taliban takeover. Much of this failure is due in part by the faulty intelligence gathered by the U.S. The U.S. overestimated the abilities of the Afghan government to protect itself and underestimated the tactical abilities of the Taliban forces. Additionally, much coverage of the botched airstrike shortly after the removal of troops became another talking point in the failure of the withdrawal. While I think the airstrikes within not just Afghanistan, but all the Middle East considered poor policy, I believe this to be a non-related issue to troop withdrawal within Afghanistan. The issue of troop withdrawal is an issue of prioritization of global security, the resource drain it causes, and the fundamental failures of other potential policy decisions within Afghanistan. And that leads me into my next and my main point, which was that the withdrawal of troops in Afghanistan was inevitable and long overdue, and that the United States could not possibly prepare the Afghan army for success against the Taliban. Looking to another possible policy alternative would be a slower, more spread out troop withdrawal over months, if not years, rather than the short one given by the Biden administration. But seen by troop reductions and withdrawals post 2012 and 2013 in Afghanistan, there was clearly an increase of religious extremism and a forward push by the Taliban. According to an article written in 2020 for the Central Asia and the Caucasus Journal, detailing the withdrawal of NATO-led international security system forces, the following effect of this withdrawal was that it created a trend of growing room for extremist groups within the area. A large part of this is due to Afghanistan's geographically spread out terrain and its mountainous terrain, which makes it difficult for conventional troops to exist upon. While this sort of information about the increase of extremist groups with the reduction of troops would seem to advocate for the opposite of this, which would lead us to another policy alternative, which would be a surge-like military assault within the region against the Taliban. Now, we saw this prior to the actual withdrawal of the NATO-led ISAF troops. Prior to the withdrawal of these troops, there was Obama's Afghan surge starting in 2009. Which, in large part, is considered a failure. According to an article written by Rajat Chandrasekhar for Foreign Policy in 2012, according to the author, when analyzing the surge was a failure due to four main reasons. One being that the former President Karzai and the Afghan government refused to cooperate with America's war strategy, that Pakistan failed to pursue Afghani Taliban within the region, that excessive U.S. troops incentivized the Afghan army to stand behind U.S. soldiers than rather stand in head, and the exhaustive cost of the surge, which waned many Americans' support for the war. Obama's surge of troops from 2009 to 2012 also marked the largest intervention of troops against the Taliban by both the U.S. and NATO-led troops. Additionally, this rise in troops also correlated with the peak of U.S. casualties during the war, with 499 U.S. soldiers dying in 2010. While Obama's surge in Afghanistan tried to exert force that would be unstoppable by the Taliban, what it really showed was that the conflict within the region was much more complicated than once thought, and that a series of factors was holding back the U.S. from ever achieving a victory within the region. An important point to consider is the strength of strategic success of the Taliban in their push to Kabul. To quote Benjamin Jessen, writing for the Atlantic Council in 2021, the Afghan government didn't lose the fight because most U.S. military forces withdrew from the country. Instead, the government's troops were outmaneuvered by a more adaptive military organization. The Taliban over the decades had adapted thoroughly to their environment and the challenges presented by the Afghan government and U.S. Jensen writes that the Taliban were able to successfully isolate the Afghan military with its expansive network and due to the spread thin Afghan government forces. Additionally, the Taliban effectively used this isolation to threaten and scare Afghani forces into surrendering before even engaging in combat. Finally, an effective assassination campaign successfully crumbled morale support for the Afghan government within the region. All of this is to say that despite hiccups and intelligence failures regarding the withdrawal is still the best policy decision for the Biden administration. Looking at the prolonged conflict with the Taliban over 20 years, over $1 trillion spent, the U.S. was unable to build a functioning and stable government that could stand on its own against the Taliban. While the U.S. cannot possibly think of staying indefinitely due to the prohibitive cost of the war, even disregarding that, both options of either whittling down troops or dramatically increasing them has historically proven to be ineffective and actually harmful towards our policy goals within the region. While the failure with Afghanistan is a hard pill to swallow, the end of this war can and will have positive impacts on U.S. foreign policy moving forward. The United States, starting under the Trump administration and now moving into the Biden administration, has made it clear that its foreign policy is looking not towards non-state actors, but is refocusing towards state actors, mainly China and Russia. Looking at an article titled Reflecting on America's Withdrawal from Afghanistan, The View from Southeast Asia, written by Terrence Lee in 2022, the withdrawal of troops within Afghanistan actually will be a positive regarding our influence and our political alliances within the Southeast Asian region. To quote the author of the article, the Biden administration's decision to withdraw from Afghanistan should be viewed as advantageous for Southeast Asia and the broader Indo-Pacific region. America's strategic reprioritization curtailed the security resource drain caused by the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The military withdrawal better positions the United States to focus on the looming strategic threats in the Indo-Pacific region, including the growing assertiveness of China. Additionally, looking now instead at China, but rather at Russia, and looking at the Russian-Ukraine conflict, similar to the positive impacts withdrawal will have at our policy goals in Southeast Asia, the freed-up capital and reprioritization is crucial regarding our response to Russia. The U.S. commitments in Europe and NATO haven't been this crucial in decades. While I personally would urge modesty with U.S. assistance in Ukraine, undoubtedly the U.S. role within the region and against Russian expansion will be critical for the U.S., and that cannot be drained by hopeless conflicts like that in Afghanistan. To conclude with my side of the debate, the withdrawal of troops in Afghanistan may not have gone through without a hiccup, but undoubtedly was the best policy decision looking forward for the U.S. government. It acknowledged the failure and inabilities to build a stable Afghan government within the region. It acknowledged the inability to effectively oppose and crumble Taliban support within the region. And it allowed a reprioritization of our national security goals and concerns and allows us to refocus on the issues of expanding China and Russian interest within their regions of the world. Thank you. Once again, my name is Liam Huggins, and this was the debate for 361 POS, U.S. Foreign Policy.